and welcome to Notes from the Oracle. I'm Connor, and together with Jack, my co-host from Cabin 6, we're going beyond Half-Blood Hill to take a closer look at the electrifying mythology of Percy Jackson and the Olympians, Book 1, The Lightning Thief. Chapter 7, My Dinner Goes Up in Smoke. Jack, I am excited. I feel like this is a nice, fun one, and at the end of it, we get to move on to Capture the Flag? Capture the Flag?
Chapter the
So-
flag, that's right.
So I'm
No,
excited. I think this will be fun.
Yeah, this is a good chapter. We've been saying this. I feel like at this point, I'm even more excited to get to the capture the flag chapter, mainly because we've been talking about it for like the entire book. And I feel like every chapter we've said, and we're getting closer to capture the flag. We're getting closer to capture the flag. And now we actually are. So I am trying to belay some of my expectations in terms of like treating this as a chapter in its isolation, as opposed to the chapter that's necessary to reach capture the flag.
Oh, 100%. And as far as like chapters in isolation, it's really good. We start with more just general camp happenings, which does include the climbing wall and talking about the literal lava being sprayed at campers, which is just, it's beautiful. It's such a safety hazard. So many lawsuits happening, but these children don't have parents that are in their lives.
That's true. Well, the
So who
parents
would sue?
actually sanction it. Hell of a cleanup, too. I know that they have like magic and stuff, but my first thought outside of the obvious maiming and a borderline ritualistic slaughtering of children in this death trap was like, damn, that must like really suck to reset.
Yeah.
You got
It
boulders
would.
falling and, lava that's like hardening. That's molten rock.
The nature spirits must be so mad. Just constantly
Probably.
burning the grass.
They definitely rotate wall duty.
Oh, definitely. Absolutely. And it's not a fun chore.
Mm-hmm. Now, as great as speculating about wall chores is, I am curious. So, last chapter, we learned that Percy can control water, seemingly, and he had that confrontation in the bathroom. And we learned first few lines of this chapter that everybody knows now. Word travels really fast in Camp Half-Blood. Now, I'm curious, what exactly do you think the campers are like? What do they associate Percy with now? And not just in terms of like, oh yeah, he's the bathroom guy, but like they understand that demigods, some of them have, supernatural abilities. I guess the thought of it being a child of the big three is so outlandish. Are people thinking like, oh, well, looks like we got another Thalia? Or are they just thinking, oh, it's probably some like minor water god that we're never going to hear about? Because controlling water, that's a big deal. That's a huge ability.
I honestly think that the initial reaction from like your average camper might be, is that like Hermes' idea of a prank? Is he a Hermes camper and Hermes was sticking up for his son for once?
Oh, uh-huh.
But like, I feel like out of the context of the novel, that's absolutely a reach. Because it would absolutely be a reach for the campers in the
Yeah.
novel as well. Like, I'm not saying that that's a reasonable thought process to follow, but I just can't think of anything else that really makes sense. I think they're all sitting there going, well, it can't be Poseidon. So what ridiculous theory can we come up with?
Yeah, I guess it's true. They could be like, oh, maybe he's a child of Hephaestus, and maybe he went in earlier and like rigged the toilets, and
Yup.
we just didn't. We didn't hear that though. Like that must be the explanation. Clarice is an idiot, so maybe she didn't tell the full story, or maybe she's omitting something, or it's word of mouth, telephone, details change as it's passed along. So it's just
Absolutely.
something that I felt like if I lived in Camp Half Blood and I had an intimate understanding of gods and the world of gods and monsters, I hear somebody used water and controlled it to beat up Clarice. I don't know that I would go anywhere but Poseidon, as outlandish as it might seem. But even
Yeah.
then, the gods suck at following rules. So would it really be that outlandish? Having a rule in place is just posturing for them. It means nothing. It's like hollow.
I think that in that regard, the more outlandish thing would be that he's alive.
Mm.
Zeus hasn't
Like,
killed
oh,
this
dang, he
guy.
made it this far? Yeah.
A monster hasn't killed this guy. That's crazy. He should be dead by now if he can control water. The other thing is absolutely, I think most people just don't like Clarice. So they might also just assume, whatever she did, she probably deserved it.
Probably deserved, and the mechanics of how it happened really inconsequential. The
Yeah,
most
not
important
as
thing is that
important.
Clarice got her ass beat and got doused with doo-doo water. That's the most important
Exactly.
thing. Understood.
And Percy had become one with the plumbing, which
Great
that
line.
might
Yep.
be the type of humor that has left a lasting impact on my humor today.
There are certain parts in my note taking where I don't have any substantive like commentary on it. I'll just highlight it because it's something that I liked. It, was sparking some parts of my brain. That was
Yep.
one of the lines. Just
Yep.
highlighted as like I had become one with the plumbing. Hell yeah, Rick. That's great.
In reference to everything we talked about for like the first half of chapter 6, I did enjoy you need to talk to the oracle, Annabeth said. Who? Not who, what?
What?
And it's like, give him a straight answer.
Well, all right. To be fair, that's probably the straightest answer he's received. It's still
That
not
is
a
true.
good one. There needs to
That,
be
yep.
some nuance in the information he's receiving. Um, yeah, no, I clocked that too. Kind of fucked up. But again, as we've talked about, Annabeth is never wrong. So I'm just going to chalk it up to she's like, this is all the information he needs. And honestly, any more information I give, he's either A, not going to comprehend until he sees the Oracle, or B, he's going to ask questions that piss me off because he's an idiot. So I'm
Yeah,
just going to leave it at that. He'll figure
given
it
her
out later.
previous conversation with him where she was like, so 1 plus 1 is, and he's like, 4. Gotta be 4.
It's got to be,
She's like,
I'm
oh my
feeling
God.
for Annabeth. Yeah.
So it might just be this, just like, if you don't know the definition of the word oracle, I'm not bothering to teach you right now.
Yep. Or even just like it's clear, he knows about myths and these mythological beings, and she knows that Chiron was his teacher, right? And even if he is an idiot and a bad student, there must be some big things that have kind of rubbed off on him. He's espoused some working knowledge and made
Yeah,
references on his own. So maybe she's like, yeah, dude, we've been incredibly literal with like everything so far. Yeah, it's the Minotaur. Who's the Minotaur? You know who the Minotaur is. There's nothing more to talk about there. So her just being like, it's the Oracle. Who? Yeah, what? It's what? The Oracle. You know what the Oracle is. Like, if you're thinking, but is it that? Yes, it is.
it is in fact the thing you think it is.
Mm-hmm. And as they're talking about this stuff, Percy is, just walking around, kind of getting the rest of the tour of the camp. And he looks down at the bottom of the pier, like under the water, and he sees these two teenage girls sitting at like the base of the riverbed. And it's a pair of naiads. Annabeth says that they're flirts. And I like that Percy said, naiads, that's it. I want to go home now. Because that's what made him completely overwhelmed, which is very interesting. That all it took was two girls sitting in like the bottom of the water to be like, that I've had enough. It wasn't the terrifying rock wall that he just saw. It wasn't the goat people. It wasn't his teacher being a horse. It wasn't the Minotaur that tried to kill him while he was wearing tidy whitey underwear. It was none of that. Maybe it added in, but the straw that broke the camel's back was seeing two kind teenage girls wave at him, kind of seductively, maybe, sitting on, the bottom of the lake.
Dude, that is exactly what I said. I wrote, that's what did it? Hot lake girls?
Genuinely, I can't emphasize this enough. If I somehow had the mental fortitude to make it to the rock wall and saw the rock wall, I'd be like, get me a bus ticket, hail me a cab. I'll walk, I'll hitchhike. I am not fucking staying here. You guys are insane. You're trying to protect me? And you've got that? That's molten rock.
You guys are
That's
crazy.
flowing lava.
They said this is
This
the safest place on earth for you.
Here's a hazard where people have died before, and we're not going to change it.
It does remind me of every time anyone in the Harry Potter universe says Hogwarts is the safest place in the wizarding world.
Oh, yeah.
It's like, you mean that place that the main villain gets into every year?
Every single year, and they've got a giant snake that's living in the basement, and they've got ogres roaming the halls, and they've got malicious ghosts and spirits, Nazis just walking around, just straight up wizard supremacists. They have effectively terrorist threats every year.
Yep.
And yeah, wizard Napoleon Hitler also specifically able to just kind of be around whenever he wants.
Yeah, it's just hanging out.
Hmm.
Isn't it
So
great?
at the
Safest
very
place.
least, it doesn't seem like any bad people are in Camp Half Blood, right, Connor?
Wink, wink.
Why are you winking, man?
Because he was just mentioning mentally disturbed kids. That's it.
Ah,
Clearly,
yeah,
that's it.
that's right. So it was a twitch. It wasn't a wink. You were twitching.
Yeah,
Understood.
exactly.
Uh-huh. We get the little drop of, oh, wait, you're not human. You're what? You're half human. You're a demigod. Which
Eh,
also, I feel like we kind of covered that already. A little weird that he needed that covered again. But hey,
I
it's official.
I'm glad I'm not the only one that thought that. I was literally flipping back to be like, did I miss that? Did we read into chapter 7 when we were doing chapter 6? And I was like, no, we did this exact
We definitely
conversation.
talked about it.
But
Maybe
now we
he
have to
just
set up to
needed.
find out about Annabeth.
Yeah, I was gonna say we just. That's exactly what I was gonna say. Maybe we just needed a platform to let Annabeth talk without her just like lore dumping for no reason,
Exactly.
like just trauma dumping on Percy, which would be entirely out of character. So you know what, Percy needing a little extra hand holding again because he's dumb. Sure, if that's the setup needed, I'm okay with it. It just felt a little weird when I was first reading it.
I agree. Although I did enjoy the kind of logical thought process that it gets to present of the idea that haven't you read the stories? This is what gods have always done. Do you think they've changed their habits in the last few millennia? It's just really good
Yeah,
world building. There's not much to
it
add.
is. Yeah, well, it's funny that you point that specific section out because the point that I picked out is they ran around falling in love with humans. And it's like, okay, that's partially true. Very PG way to put it. That's a very very sterile, I would say dangerously reductive way to put it. Which then opens up a whole can of worms of like, damn, how do you compartmentalize the fact that your parent, whether you know them or not, it doesn't really matter, have done horrible things like crimes against humanity level of bad.
I'm gonna pull us off topic because I
Okay,
like
I
this
love
line of
it.
thought.
Yes.
Annabeth is clearly smart enough to have read the actual ancient Greek and knows the real truth, right?
Yes.
But
She's
she's
read
also
Ovid.
smart enough that she has been picking Percy apart and knows everything about him. As we said last time, she has Sherlocked him. She knows every detail about his life.
Hmm.
So I wonder if she's sitting there going, you have a loving mother who read these to you like bedtime stories, right?
Uh-huh.
There's a fair chance that you had these made clean for
Uh-huh.
you. And so she's like, falling in love with mortals. She's got to walk him to it because
Yeah.
clearly Percy's dad loved his mom. Like he's already said that. She's like, your godly parent. And he's like, who? You mean Sally Jackson? She's like, all right, I get it. You had a
Uh-huh.
happy home life.
Yeah. Yeah. Or as happy as she could make it at least. At least you had one parent that wasn't a total deadbeat. Yes.
At least to me, that does feel like it could be part of why she's like trying to get him to stay on track. You're the child of a god. Let's not forget that.
Mm-hmm. That's fair. I like that read of it. I will
It
say
feels
though,
good.
if that is the read, I feel like she would be a little more blunt, you know? I know that she's not necessarily like cold-hearted, but I feel like if she was given this kid a reality check, she would be like the gods ran around and assaulted humans and sometimes it wasn't really love, but they lusted and
Yeah.
had relations with humans. Like that is just what they do. That is a defining character trait amongst pretty much all of them with some key exceptions.
Here's why I'm gonna keep running with my theory. You do then immediately after have Percy going, my dad would have. He loved her, as in my dad would have revealed his identity. And then
Hmm.
Annabeth gave me a cautious look. She really is trying to be kind and gentle. She didn't want to. It says right after that
She
she
didn't want
didn't
to
want to
burst my
burst my
bubble.
bubble.
Yeah.
She's trying not to burst his bubble. She's being kind. She's being
Hmm.
nice. And with that, Percy touches a sore spot. Who's your godly parent? And I do appreciate that she's like, What, you have to assume it's a male god?
Yeah.
But, like,
Percy
most
needs
of the
to
stories,
re-examine he's gotta re-examine his personal biases. That's kind of
I
the
mean,
takeaway there. Yeah.
does he? There's a trend. This happens a lot more for Zeus and those sorts of guys.
I'm shaking my head right now, Connor. All right? Just because it's a male-dominated field does not mean that you can immediately suspect that it's a man, all right? There are
Fair enough.
several high-ranking important goddesses. They hold their own with fucking with humans, okay?
That's true. Just ask Hera.
That's right. So
Yeah.
we learn about Annabeth's mom, Athena, but we also learn about her dad a little bit, who I seem to remember we like officially meet him a few books from now. Was it Battle of the Labyrinth that we like finally meet him?
Yeah, is it Battle of the Labyrinth or Titan's Curse? Because he lives on the West Coast, and I know in Titan's Curse they go to the West Coast to fight
Mhm.
one of the Titans. I can't remember which one because the Romans fight the brother of that Titan like
Right.
miles away, and they're like, "Whoa, we were so close."
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
I yeah, I
In
think it's
any
Titan's
event,
Curse.
we do
Yeah.
eventually meet this guy, but we learn that he's a professor at West Point
Yep.
and that he has not seen Annabeth since she was very small and that he teaches American history. Sounds like an interesting guy.
And he ends up being a really nice guy when we do meet him. Although that does make me have a little bit of pause here, right? Knowing that Annabeth did spend her time on the road with Luke and Thalia, it would then make sense that if she heard stories from them as to the fates of their mothers and the literal insanity that befell both of them,
Mhm.
then all of a sudden it's a much more, at least for me, easy leap to go, yeah, the gods aren't always doing this for the best interest of mortals, and the parents of demigods, they're not good people. And it's like, no, you just don't get it. You just haven't met Sally yet.
Yeah, I think that, she will learn that Sally Jackson is exceptional. And I mean that in every possible
Yeah,
definition of the word. She is going off of the empirics that she has acquired over her short but very storied lifetime in dealing with deadbeat parents, both of the human and godly variety.
yeah. It's actually got me thinking about our main characters, and obviously we get a lot more information on a breadth of demigod in Heroes of Olympus, so I'm going to be drawing heavily from that. But once you start seeing like a good cast of main characters that has parents that you can draw on, Frank's mom is dead, Hazel's from the past, so her mom's dead. Jason's mom is insane and now dead. Leo's mom is the only other like nice parent who does a really good job, so she's clearly dead. Like
Yeah.
I'm trying to think, who have I missed? Hazel, Frank, Leo, Piper's dad. He's nice, but he's oblivious. Cause
I truly don't remember most of these things because I remember I barely read
oh
the
yeah, yeah,
Heroes of
yeah.
Olympus series, but
It's not a huge spoiler. My point is that to add to your argument that Sally is truly exceptional, even when we meet
yes.
a bunch of other like good demigods who seem to have a good head on their shoulders and might have had a stable home life. Nah, even Annabeth's dad looks really good in comparison to some of them.
Yeah, well, it's here's the other thing, right? And I don't know that we learn about other mortal parents of Athena cabin campers, but
Not really.
I could be super wrong when I say this. I don't know where I got this information from. It's just been in my head for many, many years. I seem to recall that children of Athena are different in nature for how they like come about. Because Athena, I think, is a virgin.
Correct. So you're
And
totally
her
correct.
children are literal brain children. Like they are formed from Athena falling in love or having reverence for or a deep respect for a mortal of profound intelligence or wisdom, whatever you want to chalk it up to. And
Yeah.
this child is created and formed as again, it's like they're making a baby, but with, the brain, with their minds, as opposed to like, banging it out.
Oh yeah, yeah. You're spot on. I hadn't realized that, and maybe it's just been because it's been a very long time. But we absolutely talked about this in discussions before D and Demigods as well,
Yes. Yep.
because that is how Athena children come about. They are born, Athena was born from the skull of Zeus. He has a splitting headache, and then Athena pops out and resolves the headache by being born.
Yeah.
And so, by that same logic, Athena, when she has a deep intellectual connection with a mortal, that's how her children come about.
Hmm. And I can't help but feel like that is inherently more based in a mutual respect than the lust of, oh well, I thought your mom was or your dad was really beautiful, they were so alluring, so attractive. Whereas to appreciate somebody's intelligence and ability to think is, I would say, up for argument, but is more intimate with regards to understanding the person than like just exclusively physical. So I would have to think that Athena wouldn't choose outright deadbeats or losers.
No.
They might be a little scatterbrained, they might be a little flighty, and they might be horrible when it comes to emotions. Sometimes genius people are really, really bad. I've met so many people who are considered experts in a certain thing or area, but suck with people. They are not good with emotions, but they're super smart.
Yep.
But again, I still feel like Athena wouldn't be like, yes, here's a Ted Bundy level psychopath, but God, I appreciate how his brain works.
I think you're correct. And to that point, as we've often talked about, it's not like the gods are that much better. And even Annabeth calls it out. After that, Percy even follows up with, the gods should behave better, which is true, they should, but it doesn't mean that they do. On this topic, I did have another tangential thing that
Mhm.
I just thought would be really fun, which is because Annabeth then starts to talk about the difference between demigods of greater power versus
Yes.
lesser power
We
and,
get
and
some
all that.
hierarchy, we get some power scaling.
You know what I want to see, Jack? After they make this Percy Jackson show on Disney Plus, I want them to expand the universe. This doesn't have to be a book. I want a Percy Jackson extended universe show that's like a sitcom where a less powerful demigod has to leave camp and go back and like do high school stuff, and they just keep running into monsters because they're still a demigod, and they're
Mhm.
trying to not let mortals figure out that they're a demigod while not trying to get kicked out of high school and stuff. It would be very funny. That's all I'm saying. You could even
So
make it Piper.
what you want is Spider-Man, but with a demigod. You want a superhero show, but they're demigods instead.
Pretty much.
Dude, I'm in it.
Or
I like it.
stretch Wizards of Waverly Place, but demigods.
That too. Honestly, all I think recipes for success. And I like the idea that it's all very like mundane monsters,
Yeah,
like the snakes with two heads that
exactly.
turn
The
into
wheel
wheels.
snakes.
The wheel snakes, yes. Have we
Ridiculous
explained these
monsters that
before?
we have not.
Oh, Connor, would you like to explain what these wheel snakes are? These are a real thing.
So I don't even remember what they're called, but for an early on session in our D and Demigods campaign, I was having the group of demigods go and rescue a young demigod from his school. His name was Lincoln, and he is the main character clearly of the campaign. Not
Hmm.
true,
Hmm.
but he is amazing. We love Lincoln. And they got attacked by snakes because in Greek mythology there are little snake monsters that eat their own tails and turn into wheels and roll at you. I don't know what other context you guys need. They're ridiculous snake monsters, and I love
They
them.
are hilarious, and I love them so, so much. So whenever I need to think of a stupid Greek mythological monster, I think of the wheel snakes. So yeah, that could be in the show too. Speaking of demigods being in the real world and having to deal with not being a camp half blood, I do love that there's this little, just tiny little line that you could totally glaze over it if you weren't paying attention, where it's a few manage to survive, a few demigods manage to survive in the outside world and become famous. Believe me, if I told you the names, you'd know them. I
It
love the idea that you could think of a famous person. Doesn't have to necessarily be a celebrity, just a famous person, good, bad, or otherwise. And you'd be like, shit, are you a demigod? You might be. There's a non zero chance.
it came up in my research, and I don't remember what for because it wasn't really relevant. I think I just like came across a quote on the wiki. But George Washington is a canonical son of Athena.
Really?
Yep, George Washington is a canonical son of Athena. Oh, I remember why. It's because Hermes brings it up when they're talking about it, and I was doing some research related to Hermes. So yeah, Hermes I think is the one that confirms it, but canonically, George Washington, son of Athena. I know in D and Demigods, the running joke was, is Kanye a son of Apollo? And we were just like, yep.
Oh God, yep. Oh, that's funny. That's aged horribly now.
It has, and I love it.
But it makes it really funny. Yeah, like
It does make it funny.
the first name that came to my mind as I was reading this is like LeBron James, you know?
Yep,
Michael
that's
Jordan.
child
For
of
some
Nike.
reason basketball players, you know, like Nike. Yeah. Child of
Yep.
Nike. I I like to think that like Taylor Swift she is, but I don't know like what god or goddess it would necessarily be
Mm-hmm.
because I wouldn't. And this whatever I say here is going to be controversial. I could literally shower her with praise, and people are going to be pissed about it because it's Taylor Swift.
Yes.
I don't know that it would be like Aphrodite because I feel like Taylor isn't necessarily considered like a sex symbol. I feel like
Mm-hmm.
people aren't going, you know, they're not going crazy for her because of her looks, right? Not to say she's ugly, but I don't know that that's what's associated with her. But she
Mm-hmm.
has such a fucking iron grip over her cult like fan base that it's like, what else could it be outside of like glamour of Aphrodite?
See, and that's what I was gonna say is like my instinct is like Piper's charm speak
Hmm.
to the umpteenth degree. Like, what would happen if you gave Piper a microphone?
Right.
I feel like that's how you get there. That's how you
Hmm.
get Taylor Swift's level of influence.
But then it's like, all right, so does that mean that like everybody who's charismatic, like super charismatic and has a cult like following, are they children of Aphrodite? No, that probably, you know, definitely not. There's absolutely plenty of exceptions to the rule. In fact, if you're a child of Aphrodite, you probably are the exception to the rule.
Yeah.
But so then it's like, well, would it be like Apollo because of the music?
Okay. I think that if you think about like Frank in the Heroes of Olympus, part of what makes him like a truly extraordinary demigod is he comes from a line that is descended from Poseidon, but then is also a child of Mars. So he
Hmm.
has the blood of two gods, making him actually more than 50% god, which is why his life has to be tied to a stick of firewood canonically, is
Hmm.
because he's just that powerful. I feel like there's a chance that like someone like Taylor Swift represents the line between, oh yeah, she has Aphrodite somewhere in her line of descent, but then also all of her musical talent comes from the fact that she's a child of Apollo or something like that. I feel like that's a reasonable explanation.
Or she's just built like that. It's just she's just a
True.
pure human and she's just built like that. Who's to say? Not
I mean, I never got to go see the Eras tour in person, but I did watch it on Disney Plus, and her presence is literally fucking captivating to the point that I was like, if Dazzler was a real person, like from Marvel Comics, where her power
Mhm.
is to just be a pop star that people can't take their eyes off of, I do think that that is like pretty close to her energy, the atmosphere that she exudes.
And see, it's so interesting because I've seen videos too. I'm gonna just totally throw it out there again. Feel free to crucify me. I'm not a huge Taylor Swift fan. I would say at all. I've tried, Connor. You know I've tried. I don't
That's
get
true.
it. I genuinely do not understand it. And that includes like watching like videos from her concerts where people are going fucking mad, just like rabid. It's pure reptile brain. Like their cortexes are lighting up like it's the 4th of July. It is insanity. And it just maybe it's because I'm a child of Athena and I'm just not beguiled. Who's to say? But I just don't
Advantage on
understand
wisdom
it.
saves.
I guess so. Maybe that's what it is. But I see that and it's like, oh my God, like that's what people are losing their mind over. It's just a weird thing. Anyways, it's super tangent. I'm gonna stop it there before again I'm put on a crucifix and paraded across the street in her name.
I'll save you by pointing out that Sam and I, we own 90% Taylor Swift records. We bought a record player, and for a year, all we owned were Taylor Swift records.
But Connor,
Uh,
that doesn't keep me safe.
well,
You
you
just
know,
saved yourself by saying I don't associate with this heretic.
moving on, heresy aside,
Yeah, heresy aside, let's go back to talking about this pagan Hellenistic book.
this pagan Hellenistic book. Oh, we were talking about the snakes, so I thought you were going to transition into the monsters that occasionally appear in Camp Half-Blood
Yes.
when they're, intentionally stalked in the woods. That
Mhm.
kind of makes sense. Or especially summoned by someone on the inside. And why would you want to summon a monster? Two reasons: practice fights and practical
Practical
jokes.
jokes.
And I immediately thought there are grain spirits that we meet in Heroes of Olympus. Because I was like, what kind of practical joke would be good? Carpoi are these little grain spirits that are like ankle high, that are very dangerous in numbers, but I feel like just one would be puntable. And I felt like flipping one in somebody's sock drawer would be a great actual practical joke. Like a child of Demeter could totally summon a grain spirit, put that in somebody's dresser, watch chaos unfold,
Mhm.
let the magic happen.
Hey man, it's a good thing I don't share a cabin with you.
That is true. I live in a
But
cave.
this is what crazy ominous information to include. Like, yeah, there's
I
some
know.
monsters here, unless they let them in. Like,
It
all right, well,
it
let's
is
just keep
another
that in
like
mind.
mystery writer-ism where Rick's like,
Yes.
well, I'm gonna do this the next day.
Yep. And I'm going
So
to plant this
next
seed
chapter.
here, and I'm going to plant this seed here, and some of
Mm.
these are going to grow a lot faster than others.
It gives some immediate payoff. You get to immediately go, oh yeah, there it is. That monster,
Hmm.
that's not supposed to be there. That's a
Yeah.
that's a cool feeling. I also enjoyed hearing that some of the counselors are in college or are all in college, because that's just something that I feel like I forget, because Percy starts so young, you assume that
Yeah.
all of the campers would also be that young. But hey, college D and demigod was canon accurate after all.
It does a good job of, at this point, I feel it definitely gets talked about in later books, but the idea that there is a wide range of age, and definitely reading these books as a kid, it's like, ooh, they've got college kids here. Those are like adults, right?
Mm-hmm.
But now, being several years removed from undergrad and
Yep.
being like, damn, where are all the fucking like adults? It's like, oh yeah, they get booted out. They're not allowed here. They're told fucking bye bye, good luck, don't die,
Don't get eaten.
don't get eaten, and if you do, it's not our fault, not our problem, because we let you be a child here, I guess. Which is
You get to
very
have a
dark and
childhood, and
ominous.
that's it.
It's just it's very eerie. Like looking around this place, and yeah, it's a summer camp, so you'd expect that there'd be a bunch of kids. But then you think, like, no, this is the central nervous system for the demigod world, for the Greek demigod world. And
Hmm.
it's only kids. Just really sinister.
Honestly, I feel like it is absolutely the type of thing when you read that as a kid, that is lost on you. But the
Oh,
moment
yeah.
you come back as an adult, you're like, oh, that's grim.
Yeah, dude.
Really grim.
So what? Just because I'm 25, I'm sentenced to death? Once
Done.
again, hashtag Luke was right. Yeah, well, this is
uh,
where we learn that Camp Half Blood is also effectively runs as an open air prison, because Percy says, "Oh, so I could just like walk out of here?" And Annabeth doesn't just say, "Oh yeah, you could, but you die." She says it would be suicide, but you could, specifically with Mr. D's or Chiron's permission. So if you don't get their permission, you are not allowed to leave. Which I
you
get, it
actually can't.
makes sense. It makes sense. I understand, but also like, you know what, man? I didn't ask to be brought here. In fact, Percy specifically didn't want to be brought here. So I don't like that implicit threat of, yeah, you can only leave when it's the off season, or if you get express permission from Mr. D, who seemingly does not like you, or anybody here,
Despises children.
and Chiron, who I really don't know would give permission. I feel like he'd be like, nope, you're here now, Percy.
Yep, you're stuck.
Yep. Again, I'm trying to think, man, if I were here, these are things that would be crossing my mind. Like, oh, uh-oh. So I can check
Yep.
out any time I like, but I can never leave? I didn't realize it was in the Hotel California. This is crazy.
You're asking the right questions. Can we leave? And so too is Percy, because he's all, hey, by the way, do you know anything about the solstice? And Annabeth immediately, she's like, all right, so you do know something. It's
Hmm.
good. We've got to move the plot forward. We're now setting up, okay, we're both interested. Both these characters want to know more. These characters know very little, but we get a little bit more of the backstory. We learn that something went missing or was stolen around the winter solstice, which I did do a little bit of research on the winter solstice. So we'll come back to that later. I just love Annabeth's pure matter of factness with like, but how did you get there? The Long Island Railroad, of course.
Of
Haven't you
course,
been to New York?
you are a New Yorker, right?
Like,
Which, like, you know what, Annabeth? I love you. First off, fuck you. All right. You didn't have to say that. That's fucked up. You know the answer. It was absolutely a rhetorical question, but also, bitch, we've seen nothing but magic here. All right. So why the fuck would you know what? I very rarely am on Percy's side. You know I call him a psycho idiot. He's in the right here. He's in the right. He's seen nothing but whimsy and magic and terror, right? The full
yeah,
gamut of the supernatural. I feel like in another book that was, another version of the book could be like, no, what are you, stupid? Why would you do
yeah.
that? You know how dangerous the subway is and trains are? That's like the worst place for demigods to go. There's nowhere to run. And all those crazy people you see on them, yeah, most of them are actually insane people. They're somehow more dangerous than the monsters.
And what I just also found to be even better about this is every single time that anyone has mentioned a god, they've been like, names, names. So Percy's like, okay, I get it. We're supposed to be scared of the gods. And they just invited you in for a winter field trip. They're like, hey, don't say my name, but you can come explore my home.
Yes.
Like, what?
There's definitely some
Mixed messages.
hypocrisy, mixed
Yeah.
messaging. It's very unclear. Now, part of that could be indicating on a deeper level the kind of unreliability of the gods, or like we've talked about, the whole words and names having power thing. I think Rick just kind of gets rid of that. And it's like, it doesn't matter. We've got enough going on here. So what?
Yup.
Mm-hmm.
So it at some point gets dropped. But you know what? If it doesn't, I'll eat my words.
No, Connor,
If
that's
I'm
where
wrong,
you
I
gotta
will
go back. You gotta edit out all mentions. You gotta scrub it.
scrub it from
Like
existence. All
Stalin
Mandela
wiping
effect
people out
people.
of pictures. Yeah, exactly. You just got to wipe
Yeah,
it from memory and then deny, deny, deny. Like I never said
it's
that.
okay. If I really wanted to scrub things, I would have scrubbed from last episode when you were like, "Yeah, that 9-year-old girl is Hesty," and I went, "Wait, what?"
We'll see. But here's the thing: we've both been wrong about or we would both be wrong about the names losing their meaning or whatever,
Ah, that's
right?
true. You want me to
But
leave
I
that in
was
because at
right.
least one of us was right.
Exactly. I feel like that's the rule, right? If one of us is right, then it's okay to leave it in. If both of
Otherwise,
us are
scrub it from
wrong,
existence.
yeah, I was gonna say we got to get rid of it. It never existed.
I'll be happy to be wrong, but for right now, names are still important. So that's why she can just say the rivalry with Poseidon and name Poseidon right then and there with no consequences,
Yep, and
because that's how that
Aries.
works.
Yep, that's
Yep.
right.
But with that, Annabeth kind of trails off. She's gotten what she needed. She exposited her backstory a little bit more, set up some mystery, which is good. And then
Uh-huh.
Percy goes back to Cabin 11, and Luke comes back over. And Luke genuinely cares about Percy. He's like, hey, I got you this stuff. Percy can't tell if he's kidding about stealing the supplies, which is like, really? You're not sure about that? I feel like you were just profiling all of the Hermes kids earlier today.
Yeah, but at the same time, it's Luke. Like,
That's
would
true.
he really steal other people? If it was one of his like these younger guys that straight up look like they're Grinch smiling all the time, then like yeah, of course they definitely stole it. But Luke he seems more laid back. He seems more chill, and also they've gotta have like a surplus of toiletries.
Here's what I found really cool about this whole conversation with Luke is it is just filled with foreshadowing and
Yes.
little details that are going to point later on, which is just something we've come to expect from Rick. This is what makes me think that whoever decided that Luke should give Percy the whole camp tour in the show, they
Hmm.
read this chapter and they read this conversation and they went, "Ooh, that's good." And I want
Yeah.
as much of that as possible. And I totally respect that. I don't think it was the right choice because I think you miss out on some key
Hmm.
Percy and Annabeth characterization and building out their relationship, but I get it. Everything here is so good. The subtle bitterness in Luke's voice and his
Yeah.
tone is amazing because it really hits on this idea. And Luke even says, and I'm jumping a bit ahead, after all, we're all extended family, right? We take care of each other. And what I think is really painful about this is Luke believes that that should be the truth. And to a certain extent, I think that at this point where he's working with Kronos, he finally feels like his family is looking out for him. Hey,
Hmm.
only the strong survive will be his motto much later in the book. What will become of humans? Only the strong will survive. But he sees that as his grandfather giving him an out, a benefit, right? The world is
Yeah.
cruel, your family is ruthless, but at least I will look after you. Because Hermes let his mother go mad. Hermes sent him on a quest. And we'll even hear a little bit later when he's like, his face twitched around the scar. Let's just say I messed things up for everybody else the last 2 years, ever since my trip to the Garden of Hesperides. We'll talk about the
Mhm.
Garden of Hesperides later. But the reasoning for why Luke is sent on a quest by his father is really painful and tragic because to Luke, it's pointless. And in fact, it is literally pointless. Hermes was trying to give Luke a single heroic deed because Hermes had heard the prophecy and knew that Luke was going to become evil.
Yep.
He has seen the future, he knows what's going to happen. And so he wanted to give him a moment of heroism. So he sends him on a wild goose chase to go to the Garden of Hesperides and get one of the golden apples because it is a labor of Hercules. And he wanted to prove that Luke could do something Hercules could do. And instead, with that, with him, his family trying to look out for him and give him one good thing in life, that is what sets this whole thing in motion. And I mentioned just to you, Jack, before we started, that I pulled a couple of quotes from chapter 22, way late in the book. The opening to chapter 22 is we were the first heroes to return alive to Half Blood Hill since Luke. Not since Luke and the others who went on his quest with him, since Luke. And quests are always 3 demigods, which means that Luke was sent on an errant chase to prove himself a hero, and he came back scarred and his friends dead
Hmm.
because you choose the people you go on a quest with, right?
Yep.
Percy chooses Annabeth and Grover. So probably his two best friends, assuming you're discounting probably Annabeth because she's 5 years or more younger than him, and that would be
Yeah.
weird.
It was at the very least people that he trusted with his life.
Exactly. And now they're just dead. And it is Hermes' fault. And
Yeah.
that's what drives this bitterness. And to come back to where we were and this beginning of the conversation, that moment where you're hearing him say, once you start believing in them, it doesn't get
It
any
doesn't
easier.
get
He
any
did. He
easier.
believed in his dad. He
Mm.
got a quest, and it only made his life harder.
Yeah. I love that line. The once you start believing in them, it doesn't get any easier.
So
It
good.
it cuts right to the core of Luke's character. And again, as you said, this entire interaction is just golden. And we've talked about how Rick is so economical in how he writes. It doesn't mean that he writes quick. It just every word seems to matter, and he can make you understand a character in a matter of paragraphs. And
Oh
it's like
yeah.
you've known them for years. They just become so clear. It actually reminds me a lot of how Agatha Christie writes, which again goes back to he was a mystery writer, right? He wrote mysteries. And Agatha Christie, I feel like as an author, has just this uncanny ability to make every character jump off the page in a matter of a few sentences to a few paragraphs. And you remember them in these what can be kind of convoluted and winding mysteries the entire time. There's no like, wait, who is this? I gotta go back 3 chapters and remember who this person was. Because they just stick. They're so evocative of a specific like archetype. And I feel like Rick does that really well. And we're seeing this in action with Luke. And I also like this. There's this little thing, and it comes across as it's funny. It's a funny line,
Mhm.
and it could be read as Percy again being a fucking psycho. But it's he pulled a switchblade out of his back pocket, and for a second I thought he was gonna gut me. And that could just be again Percy's jumpy and a little weird and whatever, and he doesn't really trust the situation that currently unfolding. But I feel like that also just shows that like Luke has this air of danger to him. There is a level of cruelty. Like, yeah, there is a little piece of, Percy that like his spidey sense is tingling, right? Not to keep
Yeah.
bringing up Spider-Man, but where it's like this guy he could gut me right now. I could see that as a possibility. And then the thought
Yeah.
is discarded and he keeps moving on. But like when I first met you, we'll say re-meeting you in high school as opposed to, when we met
Mhm.
originally, if you like pulled out a pocket knife, my first thought would not be, oh, he's going to stab me in the stomach and kill me.
Yeah.
I wouldn't happen with any of my friends and most acquaintances, truthfully.
Yeah. That's not a logical thing to
Uh
jump
huh.
to. And I think that it's something that you do see, and I've pointed it out in some of the earlier chapters, where Percy does sometimes just seem to have a gut instinct that's right.
Hmm.
And just hammering home on the characterization thing, the way that he pulls out the switchblade, and as you put it, Percy's first thought is danger, just goes so well to make us remember Luke and what he is. He is brooding and kind and dangerous and heartfelt all at the same time. And this conversation accomplishes all of that.
Hmm.
It's
Yeah,
so good.
it's so good. It's so good. And I like that we see Luke has met his dad. He just says once. We don't get any more information on it. It is incredibly apparent that Luke does not want to talk about it. Percy, he's wondering and pondering if that story is how he got his scar. And through all of this is when Luke kind of snaps back out, into it. And he looks up and I like that it's what he managed a smile. Not just he smiled. It's like Percy can
Mhm.
tell that Luke is putting on a facade right now. He just says, "Don't
Oh,
worry
yeah.
about it, Percy. The campers here, they're mostly good people." Like it's everything he says is so ominous. It reads a lot like it kind of reminds me of like Anakin from episode 3. Like beginning of
I
episode
see it.
3. There's just this Hayden Christensen kind of edge, this tortured soul who is charismatic and like is a strong leader and people will and do follow him, but there's a menace to him, man. And like we have barely seen what it is. It's all just vibes right now. There's this unnerving presence that we can only speculate on. Which again, the fact that Rick can do that through writing, and again, not even necessarily writing like we don't know much about Luke's backstory. We know basically nothing about it. But the fact that it's still so clear that this is who the guy is just masterclass. Chef's kiss. So good.
Oh, yeah. Well, and this whole conversation lasts less than 3 pages.
Oh yeah.
All of this is accomplished in fewer than 3 pages worth of information. And that is also what really, I would say, contributes to that feeling of masterclass. I mean, I highlighted that word managed. I highlighted the word mostly because when Luke is saying, I think that's part of what makes Luke stand out so much is he believes what he's saying. He believes that the campers here are mostly good people.
Hmm.
He believes that it doesn't get any easier once you start believing. He never tells Percy a lie, realistically, until he straight up lies to him when he gives him the shoes and says, I hope they help you.
Yeah, but we haven't gotten to that yet.
You take my point. In this conversation where he's first meeting him, he doesn't know who Percy is, and he's trying to just be like, hey, I want to be your friend. Realistically, he really does want to be his friend because he's trying to sway him to his
He's
side.
trying to recruit
Hey,
him.
this
Yeah.
Percy kid is smart, and when shit hits the fan, I want you to take the side of Kronos. I want you to take my side.
Yeah. There's nothing more to say. It's really good.
It's really, really good. But Luke will continue to talk about it. He says he hates prophecies, and that leads Percy to start asking about his quest, which we've already kind of talked on. He's sent to the Garden of Hesperides, and we get to hear a little bit more about Annabeth's motivation, right?
Yes.
Annabeth has been told that she cannot go out into the world, but Chiron already knows her fate, and that he'd had a prophecy where Annabeth wasn't destined to go on a quest just yet. She had to wait until somebody special came to camp. And I have two things that I wanted to mention. First is that I find it really sweet that you get to see part of Annabeth's more positive side here,
Hmm.
part of her like genuine joy. She wants to see the world. She still has that whimsy within her, and that is what will make her not like Luke, but tend toward Percy's philosophy, despite realistically probably being another person that could have very quickly turned negative and been like Luke. And I think that's cool. The
Hmm.
second thing is that the mirroring of this exact thing to Heroes of Olympus, I had not realized, but I just put together that Heroes of Olympus and Percy Jackson the Lightning Thief do technically have the same opening from Annabeth's perspective. She has been told that she's waiting for a special camper to come to camp. I just found that interesting because in that one, she's waiting for a camper with one shoe, and it turns out to be Jason. And she's like, I thought
Mm.
it was going to be Percy with one shoe.
Uh-huh.
Where's Answers? Where is my boyfriend?
Right.
That's it.
Hmm.
I found that kind of an interesting parallel between the two things.
That is an interesting parallel, Connor.
she's holding on to hope. I like that.
She is.
Annabeth
Yeah.
as a character, she's always holding on to hope, and I think
She
that
is.
that's
Yes, she is incredibly pragmatic, but she is an inherently hopeful character, which is a cool little kind of dichotomy. I feel
yeah.
like you don't usually see cold hard pragmatism backed by a hope or optimism for times ahead.
Exactly. And I think specifically you wouldn't expect it from like a child of Athena. And I think it really does a good job to characterize her going forward as like, well, why does she put up with Percy? Because she has that backbone of hope. And
Hmm.
I like that we don't even get that from a scene with Annabeth in it, but we kind of hear about it through Luke, never directly, and it exudes that. I really enjoyed that.
Yeah. Another thing that I picked up from this was the very next line, which is Luke saying, Annabeth wants to think every new camper who comes through here is the omen she's been waiting for. And that, to me, raises a couple of questions. One, we have no idea. He said this was about 2 years ago that basically questing like stopped. Let's say Annabeth pestered Chiron for 6 months to a year. So Annabeth for the last year and some change, we'll say again, we'll be relatively conservative with this, has been just like eyeing down any new person that comes in. And we don't know how many people have come in recent memory,
Mm,
but I do like it insinuates that people have shown up. There have been multiple demigods that have arrived before Percy within this time span that we've laid out, and that I feel like it shows a bit of her character in a negative light. That
yeah.
she's like, oh, here it is. This is the person that I've been waiting for. And once it's clear that it's not the person, she just discards them. Like they are a means to an end for her glory. They are her ticket out of here. And oh, you're not? Okay, goodbye. Because we never hear about these people. Annabeth, I'm sure she is known around camp, but at least it reads to me like she doesn't have a whole lot of friends necessarily. I feel like it'd be hard to be Annabeth's friend, and I feel like we're going to see that more throughout the books as well. And this is coming from me, somebody who loves
Hmm.
Annabeth's character. But she is a know it all. She can be a real fucking piece of work. So I just found that little, it could be a throwaway line, but I like the idea of there have been several people that they're given kind of the welcoming committee by Annabeth and do exactly what Percy has done, where Annabeth shows them around and does the whole song and dance for them. And maybe a week, maybe 2 weeks, maybe a month, however long goes by before she intuits this isn't the one. And then, yeah, you weren't my friend. You were supposed to be the thing that got me out of this place for a bit. You were supposed to be my path to glory. You're not. I have no use for you,
Yeah.
which is not a good thing. Again,
Nope.
maybe I'm looking too far into it, but that is just something that I picked up from that line.
I did get a similar thing, and again, I think it adds depth to her character, and I think it contributes to what you were saying earlier with that no line feels unintentional, no word feels like it's not there for a reason. And I think
Hmm.
that's really cool. Even small things that are not relevant. The moment he said it, a horn blew in the distance. Somehow I knew it was a conch shell. And it's like, Rick didn't need to include that. But he's like, just you wait. I'm going to drop another hint that Percy is a son of Poseidon. Just
Yeah.
cuz. Again, I know it's not really relevant to the point you were making, but I think it just goes to show that really no word is wasted. So I don't think that you're wrong to kind of pick up on those underlying details. I think you're totally right.
Hmm. And some other little underlying details we get. Again, these are more building of Camp Half Blood. And at this point, I'd say they're almost like Easter eggs more than anything else. Cabins start falling in and filing over to the common yard. And we get a quick rundown of all the campers are there from the other cabins, except for the three cabins for the big three. And cabin 8, which had looked normal in the daytime, but was now starting to glow silver as the sun went down, which I thought was a neat little detail that didn't need to be added, but adds, again, another little bit of that flavor, that spice, that zest to Camp Half Blood, saying, yeah, there's this other cabin that doesn't have anybody in it, and it's Artemis, right? So the people that understand, oh, goddess of the moon, like virgin huntress, that's cool to pick up on.
That's another thing that I do wish the show would have included more of, solely from the perspective that it's like that type of small detail could have been in the background. And I'm going to excuse that as probably it's season one and they didn't perhaps have the budget as they're getting their legs as a show and all that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But I would have loved to have seen more of that because I totally agree. And I do want to make a minor correction. It's not the big three cabins at the end because
Oh,
Hades does not have a cabin yet
yes, that's right.
because
Sorry.
he's
It
not an
was
Olympian. It's all
Hera,
good. The other one's
Zeus,
Hera.
Poseidon. Yes,
Hera would be thrilled to be included in the big three. Like
that is
let's
true.
be real.
Yep. I just unintentionally made her very happy, and you just pissed her off. So watch
I
out.
did. Whoopsie. It's okay. What's she gonna do? It's not like she's a goddess or anything.
I don't know, put a snake in your crib, something like that.
Ugh.
I
True.
know.
Facts.
But yeah,
As it were, though.
this is, and we've talked about this in past episodes. I feel like we're really missing in the live action renditions, right? Even the show, I feel like just didn't really hit the
Yeah.
mark, didn't really hit the
The
spot.
camp should feel alive. It should be a character of its own. That's something that I do feel like is what made, and I'm going to keep comparing to the Harry Potter movies because they're a live action adaptation of a similar age group of novels, and they make the castle feel alive. The moving staircases are, in the way that they appear in the movie, is a movie original type of detail, but that's the type of thing that I felt like needed added to a live action adaptation of Camp Half Blood to
Mhm.
really make it pop and make that place feel great. And I think what's really slightly saddening is all of the groundwork for that sort of detail to be added is right here. It is the
Yes.
naiads coming literally out of the trees, or not the naiads, the nymphs. No, it's the naiads emerge from the canoeing lake and the nymphs walk out of the trees. Exactly. Why not just show a couple of teenage girls just walking out of the lake as an establishing shot? It would just give that vibrance. And maybe I just don't remember it because it was just an establishing shot, but I just don't think we had that type of a punchy scene where it's like, oh my God, that was really cool special effects.
Hmm.
That I felt like you kind of needed to bring the whimsy and ground it and be like, no, this is a whimsical, magical, fun place that
Yes.
Percy likes to be at.
Yeah, and we see more of that here. That my key point with bringing that up was
Oh,
like
absolutely.
even dinner time. There's these flourishes that make this place feel extra special. There's this own kind of, again, I keep using the term like flavor that Camp Half Blood has that makes it so distinct from other young adult or fiction like novels or fantasy worlds. It's like I can imagine Hogwarts. I can
Yeah.
imagine Camp Half Blood. And you're 100% right. The foundations for making Camp Half Blood real, heavy air quotes, real, are all right here. They don't have to do any extra work to make it there. They don't have to think about anything at all. It's all right here. And I don't understand a whole lot when it comes to like production, right? When it comes to making a show. But some of these things don't seem too hard. They don't seem too hard to
Yeah.
include. So this is again a meandering way of saying I do hold this chapter dear specifically for the descriptions of how they do dinner, how they explain the pavilion with torches blazing around the marble columns, this big central fire burning in a bronze brazier, the size of a bathtub, each cabin going to its own table, how there are four tables that are just totally empty except Cabin 11's, which is super overcrowded, but we can't use those tables because every god needs their table. And it's not talked about. You just intuit that based on everything you've learned. It adds so much to the atmosphere in such a good way. And even doing the dinner rituals, which we'll get to in a bit, seeing what they do as instead of saying grace, it's giving sacrifice. That kind of stuff I find is very important. I think adds a lot to the world building, and it is just very sadly neglected in adaptations.
Yeah. The way I was going to put it to kind of summarize my thoughts is you have to know why Percy is fighting for Camp Half-Blood.
Hmm.
And this is the type of chapter that says, you wondered why. Here's why.
Yes.
It's because this place is beautiful and full of whimsy.
Hmm.
And so good because it's the little details like Percy being able to go, cherry Coke, blue cherry Coke.
Blue cherry Coke.
Oh, it's so good. It's so good.
Yeah, I took a cautious sip. Perfect.
And Percy, he's such a good kid. I drank a toast to my mother. Good man. Good man.
That's right. And I love that. And obviously, he didn't know about the whole you have to like give sacrifice or share a piece of your plate with the gods. But I do like how the first thing he did upon sitting down was, I got to do a toast to mom. Right? He's
Mhm.
not thinking about, well, who is my dad and what's going on? He's like, I need to do something in some spiritual capacity to let Sally know that I am thinking about her and that I care for her deeply. And that's beautiful.
It is. And again, it's just another example of not a wasted line.
Hmm.
That is going to be Percy's motivation. Gotta remind the reader, this is what we're here, this is what we're fighting for. And it's great. It's so good. And you know what else is so good? That we are
The,
getting close to capture the flag as Mr. D announces it. And
well, hold on.
also,
No, 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 no. We're jumping the gun. We're jumping the gun real quick.
that's true.
Okay, we're jumping. You're skipping ahead, man. There's still some more meat on this plate. And where's that meat gonna go? We're gonna waste it in the fucking fire. That's what we're gonna do, Connor. All
It's
right?
not wasted. It's going to the gods, and it smells like chocolate
It's
chip cookies for
wasted.
some reason.
It's wasted, Connor. All right? This pissed me off just reading it. Luke's like, come on, we gotta go do this stupid thing at the fire. So Percy says, as I get closer, I saw that everyone was taking a portion of their meal and dropping it into the fire. The ripest strawberry, the juiciest slice of beef, the warmest, most buttery roll. If I was told I had to give my best shit to my parent who's not around every night, I would be radicalized. No Luke necessary. I'd burn this place to the fucking ground and they could enjoy that smoke. Because I am not giving you my brisket when you don't even show up. Are you fucking kidding me? You're a god.
I
You don't
mean,
need to eat. You have nectar and ambrosia. That stuff we can't even have that. We can barely have that. You've got the best
not
of the
to say that
best,
Luke was
and you
right,
want my strawberry?
but yet again, you seem to be on the Luke was right train, which,
He
like,
was.
I guess that
Unfortunately,
is correct.
Unfortunately, I would have been on what is considered the wrong side of demigod history. And you know what? I'm going to incriminate myself if I speak anymore. Go ahead, Connor. What are you going to say?
Luke's whole demeanor is just fantastic because you do have this idea of this kind of sucks having to throw
Mm-hmm.
this food in here. So he just Hermes.
Yep.
He doesn't say anything else. Percy's over here like, please let me know who you are. A
Yeah.
toast to my mom. Percy represents everything that this culture wants them to be and do.
Yeah.
And Luke is so over it. Hermes,
Hermes.
whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I made my sacrifice. Let me go eat my dinner.
Well, I like
He
that
does.
even.
He agrees with you.
Yeah. I like that Percy, he recognizes it's ridiculous. The first thing he says is, "You're kidding." And he might be saying that the "you're kidding" to they like the smell. That is a possibility. But I like the idea that Percy is seeing this wonderful plate of food and seeing that again, effectively has to be wasted. That is how I would see it. And it's like,
I mean,
are you fucking
he grew up
serious?
in poverty.
Yeah.
A single mother. I mean, I guess by the time Gabe comes around, is no longer single mother. But for it seems like at least for a little while, she was a single mother. I'm sure he knows the struggle of putting food on the plate and that sort of
Yes.
thing. And
He was probably not living a very food secure childhood. Yeah.
exactly, I imagine that this sort of thing would legitimately be like,
Are you
are
serious?
you serious? We're
Uh-huh.
just gonna toss good food into a fire. That's
Hmm.
crazy.
But he's a good boy, and he scrapes off a big
He's a good
slice of
boy.
brisket into the flames, and the smoke smelled really good. It smelled like I do like that. There have been a couple of times in the book where I'm like, that would be awful. You drink the ice cold drink, but come to find out it's actually warm chocolate chip cookies. And I'm like, that would
Yup.
be awful. I would hate that. That is a mixture of senses and expectations that would make me mad. But I do like how, specifically in this instance, it's like these things should not go together, but they do. It's like, all right, I'll accept that.
Yeah,
It's
I
it's
thought that was fun.
it's supernatural in nature. It's weird. It's not supposed to make sense. Your brain shouldn't understand it, but it works. Like, all right, that's godly. That's neat.
Why not? Magic.
Sure. Yeah. I do
So
like
good.
this is a little throwback to D and Demigods. Our buddy Chris, he was a son of Hades, and when we were doing the burnt offerings, do you remember what he did, Connor?
He opened a chasm and tossed it in.
He I seem to recall he didn't even open a chasm. I think he just poured the food on the ground. I think he dug a hole and like buried it.
I think you're right. I think in the original it was not the original, but like at first it was I'm just gonna throw it on the ground. That's where
Yes.
the underworld is,
Yeah,
right?
well, wait,
But it
my
was after
dad's
he got his
down.
ability to open
Yeah.
pits of death.
Yes. He's not going to be able to smell the smoke going up, so I'm just going to put this in the ground.
There we go.
Yes. That is our obligatory D and Demigods aside. But yes, okay. Now, Connor, I know you're chomping at the bit, and I
Yes.
am too. It's time.
To be honest with you, Jack, do you know what I was really trying to excitedly move us toward?
What was that? Peter Johnson?
Personally, yeah, it was Peter Johnson. Personally, Mr. D continued, I couldn't care less. But congratulations. Also, I should tell you that today we have a new camper, Peter Johnson. Chiron murmured something. Percy Jackson.
That's right. Hurrah and all that.
Yeah, it's so good.
It is really
I,
good. Mr. D is effortlessly funny. He's great.
it's peak comedy, and
Hmm.
I don't care if it's intended or not. This is so like I know it's intended to be funny. I don't know if Dionysus intends it to be funny, but either way, how do you miss that? You're a literal deity,
Yeah.
like of
And
the
it's so
theater, no less.
here, yeah, I was gonna say, here's what's interesting is he says, "Now run along to your silly campfire." I'm sure he's putting on some show. Like, I don't
Mhm.
care. How could I possibly care about this? But I feel like the campfire would be the thing he would be most excited about because it's a time of
Yeah,
like revelry and like it's a party basically. You're singing songs, you're eating food, you're drinking non-alcoholic beverages, and it's in an amphitheater, right? Wasn't that his whole shtick? Was like theater and yeah,
nah, dog. That is his whole shtick. You're
uh
so
huh.
right. Which is why I feel like, to some extent, it must be a little bit intentional
Hmm.
that he's putting on a little of a show for the campers. At
Hmm.
least that's my head canon.
Yeah,
But
this devil may care attitude, he's got to keep it up. Because if he shows he cares, they might expect more from
then it's spoiled, yeah.
him.
And for all it's worth, as we come to the close of the chapter, I really enjoy that the campers are all really excited to sing songs and eat their s'mores and share in the revelry.
Hmm.
Because I do think that's one of the things that can be lost on childhood, especially around that middle school age, is trying to be cool and not
Yes.
wanting to like indulge in the just overt joy of life sometimes. And I so love that they get to enjoy that. And it feels like it closes out the chapter so well then when Percy says, I wish I'd known how briefly I would get to enjoy my new home. Because it speaks to exactly what I was saying earlier, which is this shows us throughout the novels as we battle against evil. Why? It's to preserve this magical place and the people
Hmm.
that live there who are wonderful.
Yes. Those are the moments worth fighting for. Gods be damned. It's the people there that make this place so fantastic, not the gods that refuse to be part of their lives.
Exactly. It's really good. I got
Hmm.
nothing else to say.
Well,
It's really,
Connor,
really good.
I could really go for a s'more.
Shall we take a seat by the campfire and go over some myths?
I would love that.
Well, we're not actually going to start with a myth, though I do think that these days some might call her mythological. But it is very briefly mentioned Annabeth's five beads. And I don't think that anyone who's listening to this podcast by this point is unaware, but in case you are, the campers get one bead for every year that they survive being at Camp Half Blood. So I thought I might recant you with what we know about Annabeth's five beads. What's surprising, Jack, is that we actually only know the designs of three of her original five beads, because she has five more than Percy. It is Thalia's pine tree for year one, because it's the most important thing that happened in every year. And then year two, it is apparently a centaur in a prom dress. Year three is a Greek trireme on fire, and then Percy interrupts her, and we don't get to hear the other two. But we know that bead four is the same year that Luke went on his quest. So part of the reason that it might be unmentioned is because it pertains to his Garden of the Hesperides quest. And then the fifth one is probably another generic one like the centaur in a prom dress or the Greek trireme that we don't really get the context for, and we probably won't get the context for. But
Hmm.
I thought I would kind of go over those since they're a very blink and you miss it detail across the novels, I think.
Hmm.
More interestingly, though, is Annabeth talks to Percy about you are a demigod, you're half god. And that means that you're either the technical term as a demigod or a half blood. And this isn't a trick question. Where do you think that the first usage of the term demigod is actually used in Greco Roman culture?
Oh, that's a great question.
Just throw out a time period. It
Throw out a
doesn't have to be specific.
time period. Uh, Shoot, I you're giving me. I don't want to be wrong. I want to be so right. let me think. Let me logic through this. It
Yeah,
wouldn't
go
be
for it.
something. It wouldn't be something that's obvious. You wouldn't be posturing up with this question if it was an obvious answer, right?
That's correct.
So I'm gonna
You're
say
good.
it's much later than you'd expect. I'm gonna say that it is around, when was Greek revival like a huge thing? That was what, like the 17th century?
I'll give it to you.
Is
Okay.
it the
You're
17th?
really close.
Am I?
So the
Okay.
16th century is when
Oh,
Greco like revival classical
yeah.
stuff happens. And so you have missed the mark slightly because the actual first time the term is used in Greco-Roman culture is right around the year 17 or 18, but it's not to refer to demigods in
Mm,
the way that we understand it, half mortal, half god. It isn't until the classical period when we will retroactively classify people like Hercules and Perseus, or Heracles and Perseus, as demigods, when we're like kind of going back and glorifying their deeds and the cultures of Greco-Roman people. So you're really close. What's interesting then is that so the word demigod is it's a calque, which I had to look up what a calque is. A calque is a word that exists in other languages as the same word, but sounds different. So it's not a homophone as well. A good way to interpret it is the word skyscraper comes from English, from American cities, but it is now used in a lot of other cultures. And so the word in German for skyscraper is the German word for sky and the German word for scraper. So it doesn't sound anything like skyscraper, but it's a calque because they took that word from us and they made it theirs. Does that make sense?
yes.
So the Romans in Latin had a word semideus, which meant semi, half, deus, God, half
Hmm.
God. However, Ovid, when he, and we don't really know where the term first comes from, but our first written record is from Ovid. He probably coined the term to realistically refer to less important God. So, not like, oh, half God, as in that person is half person, half God, but as in a dryad who rules over a lake. They're not a full God. They're like half God. They're not that important. You don't have to pray to them. And so, if you go all the way back, you can even find some archaic Greek poets make similar things where they kind of call people hemitheoi, which is again hemi half theoi god. And what they're talking about isn't even close at all because what they're referring to is an individual that had literally any strength or any heroic qualities.
Hmm.
And so what they were really doing was they were using the idea of being half godly just to speak in the same way that we might say, oh, he's a godly man. He's a good man.
Hmm.
That's really all they were trying to say. They never used the term to mean, oh, yeah, Heracles was a demigod. And in fact, they might not have said it because Heracles was a bad guy at times.
Hmm.
So it's kind of interesting to see that cultural difference. So across cultures, this actually isn't really of fascination until post classicalism. And realistically, the idea of demigods, as something that we understand and just go, oh, I know exactly what that is, doesn't appear until modern interpretations of the word, like Percy Jackson. In fact, Percy Jackson is one of the most defining instances of the word and has added it to our cultural vocabulary in a way that makes it much more clear what it means. Demigods exist across a multitude of religions, right? Norse, Filipino religion, Hinduism, Chinese mythology, all of that. The only one that actually does have a word that functions somewhat similarly to demigod as we use it modern day is actually from Hinduism, where they have a word to describe someone who is a deity but was once a human, which is kind
Mm,
of cool.
interesting.
So even when the first Romans were using it, so Ovid, I will use as his example again, he actually used it to refer to minor deities, but then also he used it to recant the deeds of Pompey after he died in the 40s AD to show respect for the work that the man did rather than to imply literal divinity. Again, he was a good, godly man. He was semideus, half god, but never implying that, oh, by the way, and also his dad was Zeus.
His
Nope.
dad was Zeus, right?
He was
Interesting.
just a good person. So demigods are honestly a really modern interpretation of the literature, which is kind of cool to me. I did not expect this to be what I found when I started down this research rabbit hole.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So I wonder for the oldest myth that I can think of when it comes to like a demigod is the Epic of Gilgamesh. He is specifically a part god, not just godly. I mean, he was a good guy, right? But like
Mhm.
he was part of him was of divinity. So
Yep,
I wonder what he was initially classified as, just because the vernacular now is just it's a demigod. That's what it's known as. I wonder what the
exactly.
classification was initially.
That would be one that I would have to do more research on. Gilgamesh did not actually come up in my research outside of being a name on a list of demigods.
That is where he belongs. I get it.
Yep. But I thought that was really cool. I don't
That
really
is
have
neat.
much more to add. If you don't have much more to add, we can move on to the Winter Solstice Festival. But it was really not what I expected from this.
Yeah, dude. How language evolves in linguistics is really fucking cool.
Linguistics are so cool. But why don't we then talk about Haloa? I don't know if
Finally,
I'm pronouncing
I've
that
been
correctly.
begging you to talk about Holoa this whole time.
I know, Jack. You love your grain festivals.
I do.
So wanted to start this research from the idea of the winter solstice because it's mentioned that the gods meet on the solstices and that this powerful item is stolen from Zeus. That at this point in the story, we don't know what it is yet. We don't know that it's the lightning. I feel like if you read the title, you can probably figure it out. But we know that it happened on the solstice. So I was like, what would pull all of the gods there? And I don't think I found the actual answer. I think the actual answer from a novel perspective is that Rick is going, I needed an excuse for all the gods to be in one place doing something so they couldn't catch Luke. But there is an actual winter solstice festival that came from the Attica region. It's like Athens and the suburbs of Athens,
Hmm.
if that makes sense. And so every year during the month of Poseidon, because it's not December, because I don't think they used December, but it was December. It was the month of Poseidon.
Hmm.
They held this festival, and it honored three deities specifically Demeter and Dionysus, much more importantly. But because it was in the month of Poseidon, they always made sure to give Poseidon a procession during this festival as well. And so it gets its name, Haloa, from the name for the threshing floor, which is, and again, I'm probably going to pronounce this slightly incorrectly, but it's like Alos or Halos, Halos, which comes from, again, the meaning of the word is the threshing floor, which is where they would stomp on grains to separate them from their pods and make them accessible. So you'd have a big flat area that you would have, and by later history, you would have like oxen that would go around and stomp on all your grains to start milling them. But at this point in history, people would go out and they would all stomp on it. And so this whole festival was about celebrating the first fruits of the harvest. So you would sow your seeds in fall and you would wait for them to grow in spring, but you might be able to get a few crops before winter and you would stomp those fruits on the threshing floor to celebrate them, which is why you are celebrating Demeter as like the giver of plants and earth and abundance. However, the festival actually was only later associated with Dionysus because he is one of the latest Greek gods to be properly integrated into the pantheon as a foreign deity that was then adapted to be included in Hellenistic mythos. However, he took the Greeks by storm and became a really integral part of their culture. So they wanted all their festivals to celebrate him too because he gave them wine. And isn't that really great?
It's the
So part
best.
of it is the best, at least to the Greeks. And so they started to incorporate him in. And because Dionysus is often associated with winter, just stories of rebirth, a lot of effectively Jesus like mythology is also associated with Dionysus.
Hmm.
So they would move it more and more towards this winter time period, which is why it became then, it was right around the first harvest of the grapevines. And so all of that is kind of what the festival is about. This is around this time of year that the soil and the vineyards are also cut and the first fermentation cycle happens. So wine is there too. That is a lot of information. And I've skipped probably one of the most important parts, which is really interesting to me. It's that this was an all women festival. And in fact, the very few historical records we have indicate that men were actually expected to pay for all of the expenses of the women in their lives celebrating, their wives, their daughters. They were expected to go out and celebrate, and that men would have to pay for it as an obligation, a legal and moral obligation to pay for the festivities.
That's pretty based.
It is pretty based. What is less based is that because it was an all-female festival, we'd have like basically no records of it because history was written by men. So we don't know a lot of the actual culture that surrounds it. And some of the only stories that we do have regarding what the actual traditions of the festival were come from later Romans trying to retroactively write down the history of what this was.
Interesting.
But that history does come with a myth, and it is by no means the weirdest myth that we've ever seen, unfortunately. It's pretty straightforward. So there's this shepherd, Icarius,
Okay.
and he introduces grapevines into Attica, the region where Athens is. And in the myth, Dionysus, he shows up and he says, "Hey, by the way, thanks for being hospitable when I showed up at your house. Have this, it's wine." And Icarius is like, "Oh my God, this is the best thing I've ever had. Let me show this to all my buds." And so he goes to all his other shepherd friends, and they all get really drunk. But they've never been drunk before because they've never had wine before. And so they take it as signs of poison and they kill Icarius. They're like, "You poisoned us."
You know what? Okay, to be fair, if you've never been drunk before and then you drink this new mystery liquid and start feeling that, I'd probably kill somebody too.
Yeah. Oh, you'd be like, "You have poisoned me." It is literal poison. It's the objectively correct thought process. So they mistake their signs of drunkenness as poison and they kill Icarius. And in the version penned by the Roman writer Lucian, Dionysus punishes the shepherds by taking the form of a really hot woman,
Hell yeah.
thus, quote, maddening the shepherds with sexual desire. However, the maiden then suddenly disappears, and it causes the shepherds' erections to remain until an oracle tells them that they must placate the gods by dedicating clay models of genitals.
Uh-huh.
So they get all Dionysus is like,
And
"Ha,
they're wearing
gotcha."
like tunics too. You can't hide that. It's incredibly
Nope.
auspicious. Yeah.
And so Dionysus, that's what he does. He turns into a hot lady and he gives them all literal
Dude,
permanent boners.
that's what Naruto does. That's his sexy jutsu. That's incredible.
I hate that.
It's specifically what he does. Now, I don't
Oh
think that the
God.
boners stay forever, but that is a very real thing that Naruto Uzumaki does in the hit show and manga based on the same name, Naruto.
That is awful, fantastic, one of the two.
It's pretty great. Anyway, sorry. Continue.
No, you're good.
They're
That
presenting
brings me pretty
penises
much
of
to the end
clay. Yeah, okay.
of discussing this. Yeah, they present penises of clay as part of the festival forevermore. And with that, the festival, I must go back and mention, was a festival to Demeter originally, as it's, about the harvest.
Mm-hmm.
And so what it then became was a feast that was, all vegetarian, by the way. And they would specifically make pastries, cakes, and other items of the food, again, according to later historians, so this may not be accurate. They would make the food look like penises as well to again appease the gods by making the cakes and things symbols of sex.
This is the all-female festival?
This is the all-female festival.
All-female penis festival? God, I love the Greeks so much. This is
So
great. I
it
knew I
was
loved grain festivals for a reason. I can barely
um,
contain myself with all this grain.
and they did also celebrate Poseidon in regards to plants. I missed this detail earlier
Sure,
when I was
bring them
mentioning
all
him.
in. Bring in Zeus
But
because he does stuff with the sky. He brings water. Bring in Apollo because he is the fucking sun carriage. Why not? Let's all hop on the penis grain train. Let's do it.
so Poseidon is incorporated because apparently one of his epithets is of the plants or like of the like seaweed. That's it. And so they're like, I don't know, it's Poseidon's month, so we got to honor him too. So let's honor
Like
his
we don't want to
epithet
leave
that's
him
about
out.
plants.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, no, quite specifically, we can't leave out Poseidon on his day, in his month rather. So I have two canon relevant details that are not mythologically related at all, but are now counter speculation on these details. The first is that presumably then, when the kids all went on their field trip on the winter solstice to go visit Olympus, that they were also enjoying penis cakes.
That is
That's it.
horrible.
Yep.
It's really, really bad. I had internally made that connection. I didn't want to say anything. I figured we could just let
Yeah.
it slide.
Nope. I refused. But we'll end on something a little bit more nuanced, I would say, which is what I learned from this is obviously the winter solstice falls during the month of Poseidon.
Mhm.
And so that means that perhaps an additional detail that Rick may or may not have been thinking of, but works well for the story, is that part of the reason Zeus blames Poseidon for the theft of his bolt is potentially because it was when, like, during Poseidon's month of power. So it
Right.
might have been when Poseidon was at his strongest. That's why he doesn't accuse maybe Hades of stealing it. Perhaps another in-universe reason why Poseidon specifically gets blamed,
Hmm.
though it's a bit of a stretch.
I see, I see. Well, Connor, this has all been well and good. But ladies and gentlemen, it's time. We're finally to capture the flag.
I have one myth left.
Connor, god damn it. Son of a bitch.
It'll be short. It'll be short. The Garden of Hesperides. So the Garden of Hesperides is relevant because we talk about it because of Luke's quest. Percy will actually go to the Garden of Hesperides later in the story, so I'm not going to talk about the Hesperides themselves, which are actually the nymphs that guard Hera's garden where the golden apple tree is. Well, the tree isn't golden, but it produces golden apples. So I just thought I would give you a little bit of details about what Luke was up against. So the Garden of Hesperides is Hera's garden in the west. The apples that grow from a tree that was actually planted from branches that Gaia gave Hera as a wedding gift for her wedding with Zeus. The Hesperides, as I mentioned, are nymphs of sunset and evening. Generally speaking, they are children of Atlas, and in Percy Jackson lore, they are specifically children of Atlas. Though, according to a couple of other Greek sources, they've got like 83 different places they can come from. And by 83, I mean 3. Either Atlas and Hesperus, or, according to Hesiod, Erebus and Night, Erebus being the god of dark and Night being Nyx, or in other accounts, Phorcys and Keto. And so that's it. The Hesperides are described as clear-voiced maidens who glow like a beautiful sunset. And then because Hera is never trusting, she doesn't actually trust the Hesperides, which is good because they do betray her. She also puts a dragon in there, and the dragon
Sure.
is named Ladon, and that is who gives Luke the scar on his face, is the dragon Ladon.
Damn.
Ta-da!
That's pretty rad.
Now you may
All right.
bring us
There's
into capture the flag.
no more myths, nothing else. We can see the finish line. We see it. It's right there. I can go to it now, Connor. You're not going to
You can
stop
go
me.
to it. You can sprint right across.
Ladies and gentlemen, and people of unspecified gender, it's finally time. It's finally time. We've waited the whole book for it, but next week we finally get to go into what is my most anticipated chapter of, I think, the entire series, honestly. Capture the flag. Connor, are you
We're peaking
hyped?
early. Chapter 8.
Yes, unfortunately, I love Capture the Flag so much that it's all downhill from there. Connor, are you as excited as I am?
I'm so excited. I wrote "Let's fucking go" in all caps.
That's
under
right.
The chapter title for chapter 8.
Yes, absolutely. So let's do that, Connor. Let's fucking go. We'll end here, and next time we read, we'll be going through Capture the Flag.
See you all next time.
See ya.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this podcast and want to support our content, please be sure to leave a review, share with your friend, and follow us on all your favorite podcast platforms. Until next time, this has been Notes from the Oracle.